So then switching gears to the offense, our friend Nathan P. Geary, and he's known for a hot take or two.
They have the worst receiving core in football. I think I saw they are 32nd or tied for 32nd in yearly salary spent on the wide receiver position. They have allocated this year cash $18 million. DeAndre Hopkins looked cooked 2 years ago. I'm not convinced that this is a Super Bowl caliber offense.
When you hear Nate's feelings on this topic, I want to get your reaction to that.
Okay, I would call it dramatically uninformed.
Edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I'm your host, Bill, season ticket holder Drew Gear. That's my producer, Chris Kruger. And man, does it feel good to be kicking off the season.
We made it.
It didn't feel like it was going to get here. Like that summer, just for as short as summers here in Buffalo feel, that off season, does it go by faster when our fan base does nothing but complain?
Yeah, I mean, we are... I mean, as of today, we are rewinding the clock. You know, Gabe Davis added to the roster. Jordan Poyer. Jordan Phillips. Like, let's just bring everybody back from that 13-second game and run it back.
It is very funny. Like, the things that people will and will not get, will and won't get upset about. And I think the entire process has just made... Also, Chris, it's what we've known about the preseason for years. You know, when you're a bad team that has a lot of roster spots up for grabs, the preseason really carries some weight. You know, you're going, like, I can remember having the debates of like, oh man, who's going to be our starting outside linebacker? Manny Lawson, or is this Lorenzo Alexander guy really going to win the job? And now you're looking at it going, I wonder if that 5th round draft pick from last year is actually going to make the roster this year. If he doesn't, I don't even know that it matters, but maybe he will. Like, the energy around those conversations changes when you're a good football team.
Yeah.
The preseason doesn't matter as much.
Now you just complain about depth.
And when I say complain about depth, I mean, there are people fist fighting each other over whether or not the Bills' depth is sufficient. Imagine being a Dolphins fan for just 30 seconds and take a look at what they've trotted out there on the field every single year while somehow convincing themselves that they're a championship caliber roster. It's hilarious. It's all combined to make one long, insufferable offseason, and I'm happy it's over. We have actual football to get behind microphones and talk about. Chris, raise a glass.
Cheers.
To football. Now, I'm going to wax poetic here for a second about something you know very little about. Because in every single fictional series, okay, there's a tried and true recipe that directors and producers have relied on for decades, for my entire life, right? You have a highly talented protagonist, and then you match them up against this equally cunning and really capable kind of antithesis that works against them. And usually, for it to carry real gravitas, they have to be just as threatening or just as well regarded or just as talented as your protagonist is. And I mean, look at it. Godzilla versus Kong. Okay. Rocky versus Apollo Creed. Rocky versus Ivan Drago. Maverick versus Iceman. You probably don't know who. Do you know anybody that I just mentioned?
I mean, I follow where you're going with this. Drew versus traffic after a game. Same thing. You don't know how to get home.
I was going to say, I don't even know if you recognize any of these names or if you're more of a Katie Hare and Regina George kind of a guy.
Never heard of those two people.
I'm very happy about that. That's the relationship that the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens seem to share. But that's what happens when you enter every single season as a Super Bowl contender. You're going to bump up against every other team that's a Super Bowl contender because you're constantly playing the first place schedule. And when that happens, you're going to find yourself playing the Chiefs every year. You're going to find yourself playing the Ravens a lot. It's just...
In the AFC South, it don't matter.
Oh, poor AFC South. Maybe someday one of those teams will stop being absolute garbage. It just like Chris, the Shane Steichen's about to get fired. Daniel Jones is supposed to save his job, and maybe their GM goes with him. They just hired a new regime in Jacksonville. Who knows if that, I mean, based on how the guy said Duval, I'm not holding out a lot of hope that he's going to have any sort of success there. I mean, Houston looks like they might have the goods, but I don't know. Do they? I don't know. It's just a hell of a thing, right? Going into a game. And so this by default becomes the most compelling matchup of the entire week. You know, I think that everyone says it's always the opening game. And that might be the one that gets a lot of eyeballs just because it's back to football, right?
Yeah.
But does anybody believe that the Cowboys, as they're presently constructed today, and with probably, like, can you imagine the emotion of some of the guys in that locker room who are like, wait a minute, you did what? You did what? This is Reggie White 2.0. You did what with arguably the best pass rusher in the entire NFL? Oh, good. You idiots.
I mean, well, I think that trickled down from the head coach situation. The fact that you can't get a new contract with Mike McCarthy, who was like, I think he was 12-5 3 straight years. And then you got to go with backwards visor wearing Brian Schottenheimer because Jerry Jones has to have a puppet. I think Thursday night is going to be a bloodbath, kind of like what we saw last night for those that watch TCU in North Carolina.
For those of you who celebrate.
I was texting with my cousins in a group chat, and my cousin was like, this is brutal. I'm like, yeah, it's like being at a bar watching a 73-year-old man try to pick up a 24-year-old woman. Brutal. It's hard to watch.
It's like what we're bringing to the table by comparison. I mean, opening of the final season at Ralph Wilson Stadium, a divisional round rematch from the previous year. What seems like on paper to some of the more hyperbolic fans who didn't listen to our live show yet, early season playoff implications at the, just at a surface level. There's just a lot of juice to this that nobody else gives you, and I'm not going to belabor the point any further. Chris, with that, this is our week 1 preview. Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. Your time is going to be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. The place, Ralph Wilson Stadium, Orchard Park, New York. The weather, I don't know that the stretch both before and after. There's no rain anywhere in the forecast around this. It's going to be a cool fall day. High of 61. That's football weather right there.
Yeah.
Throw on a light hoodie right before kickoff.
Yeah, it's one of those games where it's a night game, but it's going to be nice during the day for tailgating, but then you're going to need a hoodie for when you go into the stadium.
It's awesome.
That's football weather.
It's awesome. The crew for this game, it's interesting. John Hussey threw the fewest flags in the NFL last season and was bottom 3. I think he was like 3rd fewest in terms of overall penalty yards handed out. Chris, do you think that hurts or benefits a Bills team who didn't play its starters, like the majority of its starters, in the preseason?
I don't really know how I feel about that having. There weren't any rule changes, right? Any significant rule changes where refs kind of get heavy with the flag when they try to do something different.
They did say they were going to really start enforcing taunting.
I mean, that's not good.
I think it's a good thing. Just, again, my lazy take on this. I think it's a good thing. The Bills have tended to do well in games where referees kind of let the boys play, unless your name's Sean Hockley. And then you just watch a guy get horse collared to the ground and somehow come up with intentional grounding.
Yeah.
I'm still mad about it. I will never forgive that whole family. I need the whole carload of them. Their kids, guys, plug your ears if you're sensitive to this kind of thing. I need the entire Hockley bloodline to be crammed into a minivan, and then the O'Doyle, to meet the end of the O'Doyles from Billy Madison. We gotta end this nonsense. Either that or they need to all have daughters and just end this. Let their daughters become NFL officials. I don't care. I'll be too old to shake my fist at the screen like an angry old man. Either way, I think the officiating situation for this game is interesting in that it sounds in what seems like a game where both defenses are going to have to be very physical. These aren't refs who throw a lot of flags. So take that for what it's worth. And injuries of note ahead of the injury, the actual injury reports for the week. For Buffalo, there's some real concern here. Trey White, Christian Benford. Trey White, we haven't heard anything since he took his MRI after hurting his ankle at training camp or practice shortly following training camp. And no word, but they also haven't made any significant transactions to add cornerbacks specifically to the roster.
I mean, I saw Anne Frank was going to be fine with Dorian Strong.
That is an Anne Frank take if I've ever.
That's a tweet that exists.
You could take that take and go hide it in a closet somewhere. And then cornerback Christian Benford. That's a tough one. Nobody knows what happened. He left the field. Was talking to trainers. It was August 21st. He has not practiced since.
It's not good.
Not ideal. And then wide receiver Khalil Shakir. High ankle sprain at the blue and red scrimmage back during camp and has not seen the practice field since. I feel like with that much time off, like here's the question. Have they been giving him this much time off because they want him to be as ready to go as possible? Or do they give him time off because he literally can't get on the field?
I think he can't get on the field.
And that's going to be tough because what is this all? I mean, he's the only proven weapon this passing game has.
Yes.
When you take a look across the field, though, they've also got some issues. For the Baltimore Ravens, I think the biggest, probably the most interesting anyway, for me is Patrick Ricard. I gush about him every time, especially every time I talk to tonight's guest. Patrick Ricard with a soft tissue injury. I read it was a groin injury. And that's what makes it. He hasn't practiced in over 2 weeks. And he's not practicing today. And I don't know, Chris, because it's a groin injury. And when you're a fullback who's required to not just like go out there and run and make cuts, but also like plant and anchor and drive, I don't know that playing on a groin injury is a good idea.
No, it doesn't sound like a good idea.
Especially when you think about who and what Patrick Ricard is. Like, give it a goog. He's the largest fullback in fact, actually, I think I have it up here on their Hour Lads. Let me see here. Fullback. Patrick Ricard.
I bet he's what, 250?
No, much bigger than that.
This says 311. I was close.
He's 311 pounds, but he's athletic enough to play fullback. And he's quietly a massive part of the rushing success that the Ravens have had. I mean, he's been a Raven since he came into the league in 2017. So he's been a part of this transcendent run game that they've been able to put together there. Not having him would be a huge blow to them schematically. Isaiah Likely, I don't want to call him the biggest pass catching threat they have at tight end, but he started hot last year. He is not practicing and he had foot surgery. He's still recovering. There's no word whether or not they'll actually.
I think he's out.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know how long they'll keep him out. I don't know how long they'll hold him out because I know that they said it was like a 4 to 6 week recovery time. It reminds me of Shorzy. You're 4 to 6 weeks. Oh, for sure 4 to 6 weeks. I've never seen a man more 4 to 6 than you.
Yeah, this is 6 weeks, and that was a month ago, according to NFL.com.
And then Jair Alexander. Ravens signed him knowing he had a knee injury, and he hasn't practiced yet in like a real full capacity with the Ravens yet. And he wasn't practicing today. So, I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting to see because those are 3 key pieces to positions of strength for that team. Like those position groups are reasons that we'd be talking about the the Baltimore Ravens being good in this game and matching up well with Buffalo. And as always, whenever we play the Baltimore Ravens, there's only one guy I want to pick the brain of before we go into this because these games always have a little bit of juice to them. Mr. Ken McCusick from Film Study Ravens. Ken, how are you doing this afternoon?
Life's good, Drew. How you doing?
I can't complain. Just came from a kindergarten open house. It's all the anarchy that it sounds like. None of the fun that anybody envisions it will be. And for those, I was thinking about this in the drive over, Ken. And guys, and for those of you who are unfamiliar somehow, some way, Ken McCusick, Film Study Ravens podcast, filmstudybaltimore.com. They've got a ton of great content over there, especially for those of you who are the analytical junkies when it comes to snap counts, formational stuff. Ken knows the Ravens inside and out. It's always a fun read to watch. You know, if you hate follow teams the way I do, it really, I go into this, I go into this conversation feeling like I already know a bit about the Ravens just because I've spent some time over at filmstudybaltimore.com. Make sure you go check it out. He's also a long-suffering Orioles fan. I think he shares that in common with us as Bills fans when you root for a team that just can't help themselves but let you down. And you're going to be coming to this game. Is that right, Ken?
Yep. We'll hopefully have dinner with you the night before if you got time for it.
Yes, sir. And it'll be a little bit warmer than your last foray up here.
Yeah, that was cold. Not the good result. Lots left us with a very long off season. You guys got an extra week before your off season began. So
I was thinking on the drive up here, I'm like, you come from a very analytical background professionally, and there's, I working in finance and some of the stuff that I do. I feel like there's sometimes, when I talk about coming out of this kindergarten open house, I feel like some of that's just me. Like there's something that happens to people who are very analytical where it almost steals away some from the emotional side of things. I don't know. Have you ever encountered this over the course of your life where once you go this way, it's harder to feel those things the way other people seem to?
I'm going to give you the other perspective on this. I don't know if this works for you or not, but I get a certain catharsis from sitting down and analyzing the film after the fact from a tough loss. So I think that the analysis helps me calm down after the fact. I'm extremely scream at the TV guy. I yell at the field guy when I'm there. It's an opportunity to calm down after the fact and relish it when it's a good result, obviously.
See, I envy your ability to compartmentalize. It usually takes me quite a bit of bourbon to get to that point. So, your last game here kind of had a little sting to it. I think there's something about losing and then losing in that kind of fashion that makes it memorable, both for us as fans. Also, players talk about being kind of one play to the next, one game to the next, you brush them off, but also they're human beings. And some of that, there will be something of a chip on the Ravens' shoulder coming into this one, just because of the way that ended. I feel like it would be inhuman not to feel that. And so thinking back to that, I guess there's a couple things that doomed the Ravens, and I'm curious to see from your perspective what strides you think the Ravens took to try to address them and how this iteration of the Ravens team is different from the one that we saw last year in the divisional round. First of all, do you think, as someone who analyzes a lot of film and spends a lot of time taking a look at, hey, this is what a team's tendencies are this season, this is how they utilize player X versus player Y, situational football stuff, do you think it's a benefit or a hindrance to these teams that there will be no tape on each other going into this contest?
It might be a benefit to the Ravens, would be my guess. They've got more unknown talent, I think, to the Bills. The Ravens have an unbelievably deep roster this year. And I say that knowing I'm talking to basically a hostile audience in terms of their belief in this. But I'll tell you what, it's very clear. They lost 6 guys from their roster to the combination of waiver claims, 3, which is waiver claims are rare in the league now. They only had 31 league wide. And the Ravens had 3 of them. So less than 1 per team. And obviously the Ravens had triple that. And then the other thing is they lost 3 other guys who they really wanted back, and they went to another team anyway. And it's Jason Jones, a nose tackle, and two offensive guards, which is a significant loss in terms of talent. I refer to it as hemorrhaging talent. Raven fans don't like to hear that. They don't like it, but that's the truth. You only hemorrhage money when you're rich to start with, right? You only hemorrhage talent when you have an abundance of riches in terms of talent on the team. So the only guy they got back that wasn't on their roster this summer was Tyler Huntley. Signing a Browns cast-off quarterback, and a former Raven as well. So it wasn't a good net exchange of talent between yesterday and today.
So that is interesting. in the sense that they're bringing back a lot of the same faces, and then the names that they cast off were immediately gobbled up by other teams, which, ESPN ranked you guys the number one roster in football. And there's a reason for that. People who are highly analytical about the game of football seem to think an awful lot about the makeup of this year's squad. And it's probably a net benefit that you guys are incredibly healthy, obviously, as are most teams coming into this. I mean, comparative to the Bills, let's say. Bills.
I'm not sure what the Bills situation is, but Isaiah Likely's out for the Ravens. That's a big loss.
Yeah, we don't know if Trey White will start week 1. We know Max Hairston, our first-round draft pick, won't start for the first month of football. Khalil Shakir nursing a high ankle sprain, hasn't been involved in the preseason at all. It's just there's a lot of things here for the Bills that it's going to become a hindrance for us. The names that I think raised a lot of eyebrows this offseason, like you guys made moves in the secondary. It was in the draft, it was drafting Malachi Starks. It was going out and getting Jair Alexander at a time when I didn't think that was a move the Ravens had to make. Because again, you talk about having an embarrassment of riches at a position. Defensive back on paper, you look at it and you say, oh, that's a strength of the team. And then they continued to build on that by drafting Malachi Starks to pair with Kyle Hamilton, who just got handsomely paid today. He's the richest safety of all time. And so I find it funny when you go back and you look historically at what happened to the Ravens last season. And even just as far back as the last time we played, the Ravens did a really good job holding the Bills' passing game in check during that game. I mean, you held Josh Allen under, I believe it was under 250 yards. And some people might try to blame the weather, but I've also watched Josh Allen throw for 350 yards in a snowstorm. So it was a really good job by the Ravens to force the Bills to take what the Ravens were giving them from a passing perspective. And I think that especially in the second half, where the defense really clamped down and kept the Bills off the scoreboard. When you take a look, 7 of the last 9 games here in my notes, 7 of the last 9 games, the Ravens held opponents to under 200 passing yards. And they didn't give up more than 251 from week 10 through the end of the season, which is really impressive. And I'm surprised at the emphasis in terms of adding a first-round draft pick at safety, going out and getting another veteran wide receiver or cornerback. The emphasis on that to go out there and try to improve that position group when it already felt like on paper a strength. What do you think about that? Like, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I'm happy with the addition of Alexander. He hasn't been very healthy. It's another one of the Ravens' health problems. Is Alexander's been hurt a lot. Awuzie has been hurt a lot. Believe me, the Bills are not alone in terms of having some significant injuries entering the season. Or Darius Washington is not available.
Yes,
a very important player. So they got Malachi Starks to replace him. That should be fine in terms of the exchange there. At corner, they lost their best cornerback from the preseason, JAD. When they cut him. He's a fourth-year player who they just could not find a roster spot for, and they decided they'd rather have a first-year slot corner who's got 4 years left. And I think it probably will not help them this year, but it will be a net win over the 4 years. So that's the kind of move the Ravens, regularly make. But dude, I don't think that they went overboard in terms of building a great corner room. I think they likely have a corner room that has a lot of potential injuries with Awuzie and Alexander have been just generally unavailable. By the way, Josh Allen threw for 127 against the Ravens. I know you said less than 250.
Yeah, I was being generous, apparently. Revisionist history, we'll call it. So when you think about how a group like that matches up against a team like Buffalo, where there is no de facto number one receiving threat, is that a benefit or is it a negative? And how do you see the Ravens coming into this game and schematically trying to stop this Bills offense from a passing perspective?
You don't like to play only your own cards in poker, but I mean, I think the Ravens can line up pretty much against anybody in the secondary, and they provide some very significant pass rush challenges now for opponents. So I think they'll be okay in terms of doing what they have. The Ravens are good at looking at their opponent and trying to figure out where their weakness is or how they want to line up and whether they want to play more zone, more man. But most of zone or man decisions are down and distance based.
Yes.
So you don't it's just not that much that you even decide on. So it'll be some questions about how do they bring pressure and whatnot. Will they bring a lot off the slot? That's one of their options, with Humphrey being one of their big playmakers. They're much more suited to getting turnovers this year. That was a problem for them last year in the playoffs. And obviously they gave up the ball 3 times, which is very simply the reason Buffalo won that ball game.
Sure.
The Ravens moved the ball a lot better than the Buffalo did, but the Ravens turned it over 3 times and frankly handed them the ball game.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think about matchup, like when you start thinking about some of the potential matchups we might see, I think about Nate Wiggins going into his second year, younger player. He's probably going to play on the boundary. So with that in mind, Keon Coleman, cornerbacks tend to struggle to match up with tall, physical wide receivers. The problem with Coleman last year was that he wasn't a great route runner, and he really struggled to get separation against some of the more physical cornerbacks. People talk about man coverage versus, you kind of alluded to that. Man coverage versus zone coverage. It fluctuates throughout the course of a game. There's no team comes out and plays just man coverage. It depends on situational football is what rules the day. Keon Coleman showed this offseason, at least when at camp and practices, that he's playing with an extra level of physicality and that he's learned some nuance to his route running. It's made him very difficult to cover by smaller, less physical cornerbacks. So in that way, how do you think the Ravens, who do they have on the staff this year that would probably match up the best versus the worst with a talent like that?
Wiggins is a good matchup for Coleman. First of all, Coleman beat the Ravens with some back shoulder throws on the sideline. Mm-hmm. That would be a strength of his. If you're looking for a guy who can react to the back shoulder throw the best, it's probably Wiggins on the team. They have Humphrey, who can play on the boundary in a base package. He'll probably move into the slot when it's not. Jair Alexander is a great reader of the quarterback. He'll be likely the first choice on the outside in nickel packages. So they have Uzi as well. They may do some rotation. Those guys, they're hurt so often. I mean, they're just missing half the time. They got to figure out how to rotate those guys.
I'm fascinated by this matchup because you said something. You said you guys have pass rush. Like you guys have a good pass rush. And I find that funny because again, you talk about hate following. I follow a lot of angsty Ravens fans. And shockingly, we're used to Dolphins fans being very hyperbolic. Teams that always seem to have a bigger ego than their team's performance can support. But what I find funny is every fan base has a segment that's upset about something. Whatever it is, there's a subset of fans who are mad about a certain aspect of their team, and they'll go to the mat for it every time. And there is a loud, maybe small, but loud contingent of fans who don't believe that the pass rush... It almost feels like they have kind of a similar problem to what the Bills had last year, where you've got a bunch of guys who are all really talented, but there's no closer in the group. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have team success in terms of generating a pass rush, but you have to make up for that lack of star power in the aggregate, and in some matchups, that's great. In matchups against really deep and talented and veteran offensive lines like the Buffalo Bills have, sometimes that you can flounder a little bit. So going into this game, I'm interested. Do you think that they'll be able to win with just what they bring on the defensive line? Or do you think this is a game where the defensive coordinator for the Ravens is going to have to scheme up blitz packages using the interior linebacking core?
They'll do both, but okay, so let's address this whole can of crap you opened up there.
Sure.
And first of all, the Ravens fans are notoriously the same as what you're talking about, Dolphins fans, overreacting to the smallest thing. I mean, Daniel Falele is the worst thing that ever happened to this team, and he's just not. He played a good game against Buffalo last year. He played very well the last 5 games of the season. The other thing they overreact to is the Ravens pass rush. The Ravens were second in the National Football League in sacks last year. Now, okay, some of that's the secondary and a good second, but the secondary was a mess for the first 10 weeks of the season in terms of giving up tons of passing yards and whatnot. It's just not the perceived weakness that it is. And they, to that group from last year, which basically no one left, they added Mike Green, who was probably the first or second best pass rusher in the entire draft, who they got at number 59. And he's been unbelievable in this preseason. 30% pressure rate on his snaps is one of the highest of anybody. And he's looked the part. He's like Gumby moving around the outside. He just looks absolutely the bendiest pass rusher, the slipperiest guy you'll ever see.
I saw like a still shot from one of the preseason games where he's bending the edge, coming around a left tackle, and he's so low to the ground while still maintaining speed. To see it frozen like that, you wouldn't believe someone has that level of balance. Like that's it. So it maybe that is the addition. Like maybe that's the thing that really puts this group over the top and gives that consistency that they were looking for last year.
They've got other additions by hopefully subtractions of injuries. So Travis Jones will start the year healthy, and he wasn't really a lot of the year. He commands double teams on the inside. He is the I dare you to single team him guy that the Ravens have. If you don't double him, you'll get pressure right in the pocket on a high percentage of plays, and he creates opportunity for Matabike. Matabike needs to clean up his game. Didn't have a good year last year. Large portion of his not having a good year, which he still had 6.5 sacks or something, but he had 4 roughing the passer penalties. You can't do that. So he needs to clean that part of his game up. Van Noy had 12.5 sacks. He'd be about as big an underdog as you could possibly be to repeat that. But he will provide some pressure to the Ravens, hopefully some first pressure, and provide some opportunities for the Ravens to close after him. It's going to be a lot of different people getting sacks. And Dafe Owe has put on 20 pounds. And he had 10 sacks last year. He's in a contract year. I don't see any way the Ravens will be re-signing him. So he's highly incented to have a big year.
Now, is that because of his cost, or is it just because they feel like they've fleshed out, like maybe they see Green as the eventual replacement for him? Was that maybe part of the draft plan? I don't know.
They have way, way, way too much talent to sign everybody. So they just signed Hamilton. It's basically down. I think they've got one contract left. They reporting we're very close with Isaiah Likely, but they didn't get a deal done, and they now have down to Travis Jones and Linderbaum. Probably one of those two is going to stay, probably not both. I think Travis Jones is the more important player. That's my own personal opinion. I think Linderbaum's a mildly overrated player because not a particularly good pass blocker, and that's a problem. So I hope they sign Travis Jones. I hope they can figure it out with Likely. They may or may not sign Andrews. They have just a huge outflux of potential talent after 2025. Now, signing Hamilton is a big deal, but he actually wasn't even going to be a problem in 26 because he was on the 5th-year deal. Linderbaum, they couldn't offer the 5th-year deal to because it's too expensive for a center. Would make effectively left tackle money. So they said no on that. They put out a nice statement saying they plan to sign both. And now Linderbaum wants the same contract or probably more than what Creed Humphrey is getting, and he's just not nearly as good.
Yeah, it's that's the crazy part about NFL contracts now. It's with everybody constantly resetting the market and the cap always going up. It's easy as fans to point to it and say, "Well, we're going to have the money eventually. Why you got to sign this guy?" And you can't do it. And I know everybody looks at what Howie Roseman is doing in Philadelphia and says, "Oh, the cap isn't real." You know who else said that? The New Orleans Saints. And if
Cleveland Browns.
And if you look at where that got them, where they are today, the Saints are going to be in salary cap hell for probably another 2 years, where it's just you're paying for a solid, I want to say almost a decade, where you just burned all the boats. You tried to go for broke and win a Super Bowl every year. You got one out of the deal, so I guess it's worth it. But man, to try to like imagine trying to be a fan now, selling the successes of a decade ago to people saying, "Hey guys, but remember all the stuff we did to get that one title?"
It's not just being a fan, being a season ticket holder. I don't want my future mortgage like that.
No.
I go to these games every week. I want to be there. I want to have it be good football. And I'd much rather have the level success that the teams like the Bills and Ravens have had in terms of being there every week. It's so frustrating to see that what the Eagles have done. First of all, it sucks that they won with that strategy, not because I really care if the Eagles or the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, because I don't, but I care that other people in the Ravens fan bases within the Ravens fan base are going to be clamoring for the Ravens to follow the Eagles model when that's also the Browns model. They've gotten themselves 160% of a cap year in debt, and the Eagles are 200% of a cap year in debt. It's unsustainable national debt level for what they've got. So anyway, I think the Eagles and the Browns maybe are both hoping that with a new CBA they can get bailed out of their debt. And that may actually be part of their organizational plan. And if it is, the rest of the league better not let them do it. They better not let them do it.
Either that, or it could just be that they kind of know their fan base. I mean, it is Philadelphia after all. They probably go, these people are miserable 24/7 anyway. They'll just go back to being who they generally are around the clock. Now, two things. One, Chris, did you grab that audio for me? Perfect. The last question before we shift gears to the offense. When we're talking about the defensive thing, because you've told me the additions you made on the pass rush side, the secondary side, some of the, you like the matchup of a guy like Wiggins or a guy like Alexander, even Humphrey against a guy like Keon Coleman. Where do you perceive there to be a weakness when you try to match up with a team that operates the way Buffalo does, out of a lot of what you're probably going to see is a heavy dose of 12 personnel? And you're going to be incorporating tight ends who have, I would say, a fair amount of pass catching acumen. I was about to say high level, but I think that depends on what version of Dalton Kincaid you get on that day. If Dalton Kincaid is playing well and Josh Allen and he can get into a rhythm, that tight end room becomes a problem, because in the red zone, Dawson Knox is the one doing all the damage, but between the 20s, it's hard for both safeties and linebackers to keep track of Dalton Kincaid.
Okay, so I'll address the passing attack first, and I'll just say that I think the Ravens have certainly weaknesses to the passing attack still, even though last year they were the best in the league down the stretch. Roquan is getting older, and he's a guy who already has some coverage problems. Simpson is a guy who's had a lot of coverage problems over his 2 years. Played very well in the preseason this year, but I'm really looking forward to week one. One of the things I want to see is whether the Ravens go to a dime package on obvious passing downs. And I want them to do it still. They may have decided that Simpson's good enough. He did play great during the preseason, so there's a possibility it could work out. That's the Ravens. Traditionally, has been the Ravens' biggest weakness. And players like Mahomes, they work off bunch formations, and they take advantage of the Ravens linebackers for easy pitch and catch throws. It's not, you go to the boundary, you do so at your own peril. You go deep, you do so at your own peril. But if you stay in the middle of the field and try to attack the linebackers, that's been where they've had a lot of success. The Bills had some success running the football in the playoff game. Not probably the success that is outrageous, but they a lot of the game the Ravens knew the run was coming, and they were had an advantage in trying to stop it.
Yep.
So they run for 4 yards per carry roughly in that game, I'm thinking.
I believe so. Yeah, let me see.
Yeah, 4.1.
Yep.
4.1. So, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a lot better than most teams run against the Baltimore Ravens, obviously. But the other thing about it is that the Ravens' defensive line, I'd say, there are real questions after the big two in terms of how good their interior defenders are this year. So Travis Jones is extraordinarily good, and so Matabike should be good. But there are other guys. They have Aeneas Peebles, who's a rookie. They have John Jenkins, who's a cast off of the Raiders, now 35 years old. Who's their backup nose tackle, and they have Broderick Washington, who has looked pretty good, honestly, in camp so far this year, but I don't think he's on the scale with the higher level interior defenders in the league.
And see, that's where you look at the philosophy of like what the Bills did with a youth overhaul at the defensive tackle position comparatively, and you say, okay, I see what you're doing here, because you're a team that likes to be able to platoon those positions to try to keep them fresh into third and fourth quarters. If you know that your group is shallow, it puts you at something of a disadvantage for things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but Baltimore, extreme rotational team.
Sure.
So nobody
Sure.
plays a super high percentage of the snaps, and I'm sure that's true probably in Buffalo too. And I haven't looked at Oliver's snaps to see what percentage he played last year. Mm-hmm. Most NFL teams, they can't afford to keep their defensive linemen on the field. It still bothers me that Pittsburgh seems to be able to do it, and some of the other 4-3 teams seem to find the right players that they can keep them on the field more of the time. That kind of bothers me a little bit, but the Ravens haven't really been a team that's done anything but rotational play on the defensive line.
So then switching gears to the offense, our friend Nathan P. Geary, WGR radio host, comes on our show. He drinks liquor with us. He gets fired up and he says a lot of things, and he's known for a hot take or two. And this was one that he hit us with when we were talking about the ESPN rankings I mentioned a few minutes ago, about how they ranked the Ravens as the number one roster in the NFL.
They have the worst receiving core in football. I think I saw they are 32nd or tied for 32nd in yearly salary spent on the wide receiver position. You think the Bills are bad? They have allocated this year cash $18 million.
DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers. And after that, I don't recognize us.
Devontae Walker, nice little player from North Carolina, did the draft. Like him. Is he going to be? He's probably going to be their number 3, number 4 receiver. DeAndre Hopkins looked cooked 2 years ago. Zay Flowers is a good player, but I don't really think he's a slot. Like, he's not an every down slot. And they just paid Rashad Bateman, who had like 8 good games.
Jesus, I didn't know
I'm
this.
not convinced that this is a Super Bowl caliber offense.
That's Nate Geary on our show.
And this was
about a month ago.
And this was me not knowing the Ravens depth chart and saying, like, I didn't know that. Okay, you're telling me these things. I'm looking at it in our lads going, I don't recognize any of these people. Who are they? Now, that doesn't mean that because we don't know about them, they're not talented, because I bet you there was a whole contingent of Bills fans who had no idea who the hell Justice Hill was until he ripped us a new one in that September football game that we lost to the Ravens last year. Mm-hmm. So when you hear Nate's feelings on this topic, I want to get your reaction to that, and then kind of a synopsis of how you see this year's wide receiver core.
Okay, I would call it dramatically uninformed. Let's start with the beginning, the $18 million of cash. The Ravens haven't re-signed a wide receiver in many years. They've gone to the draft because the position they believe is overvalued in the NFL, and it's especially overvalued when you have Lamar Jackson. And this is something that every receiver who comes to Baltimore needs to know. The offense completely runs through Lamar, and your statistics aren't going to matter to us. Okay. Last year, within that framework, Rashad Bateman had the best ever yards per target for any receiver in Ravens history, any wide receiver. And you know, he's not thought of as being a great receiver in the NFL, but he had fantastic stats last year. Had 8 good games. That's kind of a foolish way to look at it. He was an outstanding player and was the highest also percentage of touchdown catches for any Ravens receiver in their team's history. In fact, any skill position player who had 30 or more targets in their career. Flowers is outstanding. The problem with Zay Flowers' usage is, prior to 25, is that they used him for, I think, too much gadgetry or novelty plays around the line of scrimmage, and they didn't use him enough to impact the opposing safeties, which is a lot of the value that Flowers gives you, is going down the field and manipulating safeties around and allowing Lamar to open up the middle of the field. Longer the play goes, for most quarterbacks, that's a bad thing. Most quarterbacks, a bad thing. Not for Lamar Jackson. It's a good thing for Lamar. So those are the top 2. Let me keep going down the roster. Sure. We may as well go 1, 2, 3. If you go to DeAndre Hopkins, I don't believe the guy has anything left in the tank. I'm not counting on for anything. 350 yards might be a reasonable assumption of what I get. What I really hope happens is that Devontae Walker takes his role. Yes. And that would be ideal if he did. And Walker is a not just unproven, but also a flawed receiver in that he did not have the set of comeback routes necessary to exploit his own speed going down the field. So when you're running routes, he loves to run 7, 8, 9, but you have to have the complementary routes to go with that.
Sure.
So he has to be able to come back for the football. It was a problem at North Carolina. It's still a problem today. In the Dallas game, they threw him the ball 8 times. All of them were shorter passes where they're essentially forcing scheme upon him.
Okay.
To do that. And he's had a good summer of coming back for the football. So hopefully he's improved. That's number 4. Number 5 is Mike Wallace, and he might really be more like the number 4 receiver. He's a great run blocker, one of the best in the entire NFL. He had 16.2 yards, or over 15 anyway, yards per target last year. Might have been 16.2.
Okay.
But anyway, it's one of the best totals in recent history. It gives you that great run blocking. It's exactly what the Ravens want out of that position. Allows you to keep fresh legs on the field. He actually plays a lot of snaps and is not really known for doing that, but has a lot of value to the Ravens. They brought him back on a cheap deal, and that's what the Ravens do. They find value where other teams aren't able to do it. And the number 6 guy is LeJontay Wester. Now he was with Shadur Sanders at Colorado. Outstanding punt returner, by the way. He had a huge 87-yard punt return in the preseason that looks like he's jitterbugging through the entire defense. At one point, he's literally surrounded by 4 separate Colts, and none of them could get him to the ground. And on his first return, it was only 17 yards. He was run into by his own player twice on the, on the run. That's what really held him down. So he looks terrific. He's a very shifty gadget player who's a good yards after the catch guy, a guy who can make some plays behind the line of scrimmage, be used in jet motion. And I think that they'll get a lot of value out of him too. So most Ravens fans, honestly, right now will tell you this is the deepest wide receiver group the Ravens have ever had. So if you don't think it's good, well, let's let this play out here.
Well, exactly. And so in terms of the expected target share, you've already said you don't expect much from DeAndre Hopkins. Going up against a team in Buffalo that has one really good outside corner, one highly touted, very veteran, we all know Teron Johnson's starting to slow down a little bit, but he's still good within the scheme that he plays in. And behind that is a lot of questions. You've got a safety group that much maligned here by Bills fans. We've got a cornerback position on the other side of the field in the boundary that we've tried to throw bodies at, and none of them can stay healthy. It's like it really is becoming the Oregon Trail there, where everybody who picks up the mantle of CB2 either tries to ford the river and dies, they end up with dysentery. And so there exists a world where we may end up starting Jamarcus Ingram at outside corner, who is he played a really good dime back for Buffalo last year. He did a lot of really good work in terms of his physicality as a cornerback against other wide receivers. As a starting boundary cornerback in the NFL, he was an undrafted free agent for a reason. So he has physical limitations, athletic limitations that I think it would be somewhat dangerous to put him in that position. You would be asking a lot. You would need to give him a lot of support schematically in order to allow him to function in that capacity. And so with that in mind, knowing that ahead of this game, how do you expect the target share in this game to kind of shake out?
It's kind of like asking the question, do you think that Lamar Jackson is going to run a lot in this game?
True.
Lamar Jackson will run a lot as soon as the defensive end is crashing down on Derrick Henry every play.
Yeah.
Lamar, he's the fantastic reader of opposing leverage, and
sure.
He'll figure that out. I think the same thing is true of the passing game. I think, Mark Andrews will typically be one of the Ravens' biggest targets in any game, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have other choices, or the extended play targets don't change play by play, or that the scheme, in fact, won't just take advantage of wherever the Bills are weak. So I think the Ravens know how to take an advantage of an opponent, as like other teams. And I'm not sure I can tell you where the target share will go based on that.
Well, I think it's hard coming into a game like this because you're talking about being able to exploit that. It just stinks that you're missing what is, even if he had a quiet second half of the season, having a weapon like Isaiah Likely who can stress a defensive scheme and open up plays for other people around him, even when he's not getting the football. It's hard knowing he's not going to be a part of this game. It does put a lot of pressure on Mark Andrews and the rest of that tight end room. And for Mark Andrews, I don't know that a game in the playoffs, like walking back in here, earlier I was talking about chips on shoulders. I don't know that a postseason game went worse for any one individual player in last year's postseason across the entire NFL than the 2024 divisional round game went for Mark Andrews.
I think that's fair. He had what I would say, he was seriously psychologically impacted after the game. Now, a few things happened. He didn't show up for the podium, and it's something that sometimes you'll do and sometimes you don't after a game like that. But
sure.
But oftentimes, in particular, it's something kickers, they never show up after the podium for something like that.
Kickers are like goalies. They're all head cases.
Well, Andrews, he got married in the offseason, and he didn't actually talk to the media about the game for a fairly significant period of time. I don't remember if it was like 2 months or it was like 3 weeks, but it was, it was a substantial, it wasn't like the next week or anything. He was talking to the media about the game. He's like, I've had to do a lot of soul searching about what happened. And, he all but lost them the football game independently. I mean, they had 3 turnovers in the game. One was Lamar on the interception. One was on the fumble, which was more on Linderbaum than anybody else in terms of a bad snap.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, Andrews lost the football in the fourth quarter at an enormously important time on the fumble to stop a drive, and then he dropped the 2-point conversion. So it could not have gone much worse. And yet he really did have a great season.
Yeah.
And the Ravens depend on him. They'll. I don't think that's changing. The connection between him and Lamar is very apparent still in camp. He seems to be the first choice on a lot of that. But if there's ever a guy who is like grounded enough to really come back from it, it would be a player like Anderson. Lee Evans would be another player in Baltimore history who's vilified for what happened to him in New England when Sterling Moore, I think it was Sterling Moore, made a great play to strip the ball. He should have held on to it, but that was bad. Billy Cundiff missed the kick right after that. Those two guys never recovered. They never played another game for the Ravens. In the case of Andrews, I don't think that's really a risk. He's in the last year of his contract. The Ravens might re-sign him, but it's probably either him or Likely. And I think if I had to guess, it's probably going to be Likely based on him being younger.
Mm-hmm.
He won't be cheap. Likely will be more expensive, but he is younger.
Yeah. It's one of the, you're talking to a fan base that we lived the Scott Norwood experience. And in fact, it was actually one of the coolest things. If you ever watched The Four Falls of Buffalo, there's a moment where Scott Norwood opens up about going down to City Hall the day after they all come back to town and they're going to do a thing at City Hall. And the team goes down there and the whole city comes out to cheer on, hey, our first Super Bowl appearance ever. This was great. And Scott Norwood's hiding in the back of the building. He's like, I can't go out there and face those people. And the whole crowd starts chanting his name until he comes out. And like they're interviewing fathers who are talking to their sons about how like this is a learning experience because that's what family does.
Now imagine that moment with social media.
And that's the problem, I think, is that the noise around that game and that moment got really loud. And yeah, it can be psychologically heavy. And it'll be interesting to see how he rebounds from that. And in terms of, we've talked about the passing game. In terms of the rushing attack, in case any Bills fans out there forgot, I don't know how you might have forgotten, but the Baltimore Ravens are pretty damn good at running the football. Not just good. Chris, when I tell you the Ravens are good at running the football, you'd nod your head and agree with me, right?
Correct.
If I said the most dominant I've seen maybe in my life over the last decade, you'd go, maybe. 2024, they were first in the NFL in rushing yards. 2023, they were first in the NFL in rushing yards. 2022, they were second. 2021, they were third. 2019, first. 2020, first. 2018, second. They have been running the hell out of the football for as long as I think some Bills fans knew we had a football team, considering all the bandwagon nonsense that's taken place since Josh Allen became our quarterback. I don't expect that to stop. And so I'm sure they are going to come into this game with I think the Bills did an admirable job, especially in the first half in that divisional round game, of finding ways to be strong at the point of attack on the line of scrimmage and at least force the Ravens into passing situations. And that's really that's all you can hope for against a team like Baltimore with the running back talent, the threat to run that the quarterback is. In terms of this offensive line, again, we're talking about the hyperbolic portions of your own fan base who are upset about the state of the interior offensive line. As an outsider, I do see a Daniel Falele, who I hear an awful lot of noise about. And then I know that there's I believe, a 7th round pick, Andrew Voorhees, who is starting at the other left guard position. These aren't highly touted draft picks. They weren't highly drafted. They don't get a ton of press. The interior offensive line, what do you think of that group coming into this game in this season?
Okay, so Voorhees is a 7th round pick who was hurt at the combine and had 38 bench reps, was the strongest guy in the entire combine in terms of that. But he was injured, and so that killed his draft stack. And the Ravens actually traded back into round 7,
just to
trading their 6th round pick for the next year to Cleveland to get him, and then NFI'd him for the entire year.
Wow.
So they had him redshirt a season. Then he came back last year and he was the starter in week 1, got hurt, and came back and played well in the week 18 game. So McCary basically took his job and Voorhees did not get it back. McCary got sick in week 18. That's the only reason he got in the game. And then McCary was back at the left guard in the playoffs. Voorhees had a fantastic preseason when you consider it's been 31 total snaps. If you look at a PFF or whatever, it looks very strong, looks mobile, has the mobility they need. I think he's going to be fine, and the Ravens have him for 3 more years. He's way ahead of the curve in terms of where he needs to be at this point to be very excited about him as a player. On the other side, Daniel Falele is one of the biggest human beings in the league. He does not play up to his size, but he finished the year extremely strong. Last 5 games, he had 309 snaps, allowed 2 pressures, had no penalties, and there's 2 pressures as I count them. PFF give you a different number out there. But he was outstanding in the last 5 games is the point. And they gave up a terrible sack in the preseason. As bad as you'll ever see.
And is that what got everyone
starts?
I was going to say, is that what brought out the Twitter birds and everybody screaming into the ether? Okay.
What's funny is that Ben Cleveland, the very next week, had virtually an identical sack allowed. He basically fell over, got pancaked, by a rush. And both those guys are enormous. So it looked very similar in terms of how they went down. And it actually turned out that Cleveland's was only a pressure, and Falele's happened to be a sack also, which made it that much worse. But the best line I heard about it was from Todd Monken, who at camp was asked about it and said, if you want to look at the video of that sack, I'll just say, I could have video of somebody going into church, and that doesn't make them a good Christian.
I like that. Because we're just thinking about efficiencies and places the Bills might be effective in this game. Ultimately, you alluded to this earlier, because I think in every game, especially ones against teams that are tightly matched in terms of overall talent, in terms of the star power they hold at quarterback, in terms of coaching and coordination, there ends up just being a few statistical lines that the game falls across. And the divisional round game, you hit the nail on the head. It was the turnover margin. And the Buffalo Bills were outgained in most offensive statistical categories, but it didn't matter because the turnover margin tipped the table just enough in their direction that they ended up walking out of there with a victory. In a game where some teams struggle with offensive efficiency, if that team loses the time of possession battle, more often than not, they're going to lose the football game. Like, you find all these little things within football where you go, it's all this stuff, all the X's and O's, all the theoreticals, and it all boiled down to one stat line. What's a stat line that you think the Ravens have to win if they're going to win this game?
Well, points is the easy answer.
Sure.
But, I don't think they'll lose the game if they win the turnover battle.
Okay.
I'll say that. But there's a whole lot of games you're tied in the turnover battle, and that that's a lot of the total field. Maybe 40% of games you end up with the same number of turnovers exactly, and you need to win a high percentage of those games too. So looking at this team, they're very well put together. They have all, and this is true of the Bills too. They do a lot of things well, and they can beat you a lot of different ways. They can beat you with the run. They can beat you with the pass, and
they can beat you with running backs in the pass, which is why Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill. Nobody knows who these people are, and I go, you just wait. It's going to be terrible. It's something. Me as the pessimist that I am, I go, if you forget about them, and God forbid the defensive coordinator forgets about them, they will remind you in spades out there on the football field.
Keaton Mitchell was the Ravens' single best, most impressive player in camp. I mean, he normally I can't tell with running backs, so I'm there every day. And if you look at a typical running back, each one has their own characteristics, but Justice Hill and Rasheen Ali, they run left, they run right. You can't really tell if they're hitting the hole properly. Some plays are well blocked. Was it them making a good play? I can't tell. With Derrick Henry, I can't tell because nobody will get in front of him in practice. and it seems like silly. You're thinking, oh, he's big. It's part that. It's part they don't want to get him hurt.
Yes.
So they don't want either of those things to happen. They won't get in front of Lamar Jackson either. And Lamar has some outrageous long runs. The crowd goes wild, and then you wonder, would that have really happened? Probably the answer is no in most cases. But Keaton Mitchell looks like he's cutting on a freaking dime. He looks like 2023 Keaton Mitchell again. And that season in 47 carries was the best in NFL history in terms of DVOA for any running back in 40-plus carries.
I have bought a lot of shares in fantasy football and dynasty leagues of Keaton Mitchell. So
there you go.
It's going to be I feel like it's hard to open a season like this, right? With a game where on one hand, you're going to have the emotional high of, oh my God, this game is so important. And then you can think back just 12 months ago to where the Bills and Ravens were doing this before, and the outcome really didn't, you watched the Bills, Josh Allen goes to the podium afterwards and goes, well, I'm glad we got that game out of the way. And he was completely unfazed, and rightfully so. I think that we as fans will make more of it than it means to the season as a whole, but it's a great litmus test, I think, for both teams right out of the gate of where do you stand in terms of the AFC.
It's frankly a much more important game for the Ravens to win than it is for the Bills. The Bills have the advantage of the AFC East.
Yes.
And you guys will be bailed out by that. And Kansas City had the same freaking thing too.
Yep.
And the Ravens playing in the North have one of the tough divisions in football, and they'll have a lot of tough games. They have a monstrous early season schedule between the Lions and the Bills and the Chiefs. They face all of the first 6 weeks. It's a very tough run for them. And if they got it, they could certainly get behind and be 2-4 after 6 weeks. That's not impossible to see. And I think they would still have a pretty good chance to make the playoffs even after that, but it wouldn't be a sure thing. That's for sure. And they need to win some football games early on. And Buffalo, if they want to have a good chance at least the 2 seed in the AFC, is one of the games they need to win.
Well, guys, it's always fun getting to break this down with Ken McCusick. Ken, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your work, where they can follow you on social media?
I appreciate that. I'm at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. The podcast is Film Study Baltimore Ravens Talk. If you want to come take a listen, there'll be all kinds of related to Bills content, preview shows, and the Know Your Foe show with Drew that I'd love to have you come and hear. And what else is there? FilmStudyBaltimore.com is the website. There's articles up there if you want to check out who played well in the preseason. I take you 1 to 90 on the players there in terms of who's played on the offensive and defensive side.
Ken McCusick at Film Study Ravens on Twitter, FilmStudyBaltimore.com. Drew has done Know Your Foe with Ken. That's out on any platform you get your podcasts. Ken McCusick's great. He's going to be here for the game. Hopefully he'll show up to the tailgate to party. It
is funny that his listeners love me. And I'll just see random tweets where they're like, oh, best Know Your Foe guest of the year. And I'm like, I don't understand how, because you're a film review podcast. What? How do I rank? But I'm not going to question it. Why look a gift horse in the mouth?
You probably relate to some of his listeners.
What, in that we
drink?
Fair.
I said this in the live show last week. Name another content creator for the Bills that drinks on camera. I'll wait.
So it's in the spirit of that we launched this week's Keys to Victory.
Wow, that's a lot of keys. Bigger the keychain, more powerful the man.
Keys to Victory are brought to you by Triple Bogey this season. Yeah, three pack of keys, Triple Bogey. It's Canada's premium golfing lager, Chris. Found on golf courses all over Canada. If you don't, guys, if you live in Canada and you're listening to this, go to www.triplebogey.com. You can find a distributor near you. And if you don't, just maybe look for a Rockpile Report tailgate or a Bills helmet bar near you. I'm sure we can help sort you out. It's a great beer. I mean, it's Christopher. It's what you would refer to as crushable.
Yes,
which is what's led to its success up there far north.
I gave one to my father-in-law yesterday.
Any tasting notes on his part? Anything about mouthfeel that some of our listeners might get mad about?
No.
No, it's a great beer. I was stunned with that they have not only this, but they also have an amber, which I'm going to be cracking into here shortly. Both of their beers are incredible. They got a lot of flavor, very clean drinking. I'm a huge fan, and I'm a big fan of the fact that they'll be a part of the Rockpile Report this season. Keys to victory for the Buffalo Bills when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens. Ken and I kind of talked about this, and it's, first of all, turnover margin, and by virtue, time of possession. It's stupid, it's repetitive, and yet here we are. Like, when Ken and I were having this conversation earlier, we had a hard time of finding what's going to separate this. To me, this is the one. The Bills have to win it. And that's probably because by default, they're going to lose a lot of the other ones. Like, just off the top of my head, Chris, if I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm going to talk about, what, rushing yards? Do you expect the Bills to outrush the Baltimore Ravens?
No, unless there's an injury.
Probably not. Yards, or the game gets so out of hand that all the Ravens do is have to pass protect, and we just run the ball in garbage time to get the hell out of there. Yards per reception. You talk about, I think when it comes to this statistic, Ken kept referring back to yards per reception and how great that was. I've got a little bit of that in a second. It actually feeds into our second key to victory, but yards per reception, I do expect the Baltimore Ravens to win that one by virtue of what they are. Third down conversion percentage. Their defense is physical and our wide receivers don't separate well. That's a bad matchup. I don't expect, just like they didn't in the divisional round, I don't expect the Bills to outperform the Ravens in this metric. The one place which we've seen play out in front of us, and I feel like that's the problem with this matchup, is it's the same recipe, just different ingredients for each team, right? The one place where you can find an equalizer is just an offensive efficiency and then promoting offensive inefficiency on the other side of the football, even if it's just for a short stretch of time. The Bills won the turnover margin in the divisional round, and they went on to win the game narrowly. But as a byproduct, like, you look at, even for just a short period of time of the game that affected, because Chris, outside of the first 18 minutes of clock, 20 minutes out of a 60-minute game, the Buffalo Bills were the better team for that short period of time, and that's all it took. Their first 4 drives, touchdown, punt, touchdown, touchdown for Buffalo, and a pair of 70-yard drives mixed in there. The Ravens' first 4 were a touchdown, an interception, a fumble, and a field goal. And the difference was a 3-minute plus difference in time of possession. That's all it took to skew the game enough in Buffalo's favor that they could come away with a victory. We have to force at least a section of the game. I don't care if you start slow. I don't care if it's the way you close the game. At some point, you are going to have to cause about 20 minutes of offensive inefficiency for the Ravens. And if you can't do that, I don't think this is a football team that you want to get into a firefight with, because you are kind of going into it based on the makeup of your passing attack with one hand tied behind your back. That leads me to my second one, which is our linebackers are going to have to trigger on the running backs in the passing game. When it comes to the receiving game, you heard Ken. Just I did like Ken's reaction to Nate's slander.
Yeah, that's why it's the beginning of the show.
It's so funny. Like, he talked up the Ravens receivers in their statistics, though, in term, the best in Ravens history, statistically in this category of yards per reception. And yes, in that metric, they were very good. Also, all of the metrics last year show that in terms of wide receiver separation, the Ravens and Lamar Jackson were far ahead of the rest of the NFL. Chris, you know those heat maps that people like to put out, like the analytical, like the X and Y axis with like different dots all over, and they show you who sits where in certain advanced analytics. I remember seeing the ones where it's like, average wide receiver separation per attempt. And Lamar Jackson is out here on his own on an island, way at the front of the pack. And then Josh Allen is near the back half of the map. And we're still churning up points. We're scoring in spite of the fact that our wide receivers are not, by design of our offense, getting open. And I don't know. There's a difference there. And that's why when you say, it was the best season in yards per reception. Okay, but how many catches are we talking? What's the sample size? It's why I don't like that statistic, and I don't love steering into it. And I think that the problem when you're trying to, but Chris, it's something that we do to other teams. You're so focused on the running back and quarterback that you lose track of wide receivers who otherwise in a vacuum, each one of them is not overwhelmingly talented. It's just that Todd Monken and that offensive coordinating group has done a really good job of scheming their players open. But also I think it's because their running game is so much more something that defensive coordinators have to prepare for. I wonder, Chris, does James Cook get any respect this year? Like, does that dynamic bleed into what the Buffalo Bills do, or what the Buffalo Bills see from opposing defensive coordinators in ways that they didn't before, knowing that James Cook is coming off the season that he had.
Well, if he doesn't get a hot start out the gate, people are going to go, well, why did you give him that contract? Why is he getting all that money if he's...
people don't necessarily matter, though. Like, our opinions as fans don't matter. But I guess it's the thing of everybody's going to respect Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. You have to. And everybody's going to respect Josh Allen's ability to run. One of the big questions is going to be, did James Cook do enough to put himself in that conversation? Now, that didn't make the list, but it was up there kind of flirting around if I was going to pick a fourth one. But I went with this because when you think about it, we, as the Buffalo Bills, use James Cook and Josh Allen to put defenses in enough conflict that they have no choice but to commit extra assets. And then you can take a group of maybe not overwhelmingly talented wide receivers, and you can make hay with that. In the same way, the Ravens have done it, but the place where they've crucified us in the past was using the running backs and allowing them to be receivers. You go back to when we lost to the Ravens back at the beginning of 2024. That game, Chris, if we were coming off of a fantasy football game and I told you that my wide receiver 2 put up the following stat line, you'd probably tell me it was a good day. 6 of 6, right? 6 targets, 6 catches, 78 yards, 66 of which were after the catch, 1 touchdown, and 4 catches that went for a first down. 19.8 PPR league fantasy points. You'd tell me that was a really good day for my wide receiver 2, right?
Yeah.
Guess who did that to us?
I don't know.
Justice Hill.
Oh, yeah, I see it right here.
The backup running back for the Ravens. And now, mind you, this is a game where we were missing Matt Milano.
Now it's Keaton Mitchell.
We were missing Terrell Bernard. We were missing Teron Johnson. The core of our nickel defense was missing. And the guys that they plugged in just weren't athletic enough and didn't have their head on a swivel enough to rein that in. You know, no disrespect to Dorian Williams and Balin Spector, but you're not Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard.
There's a reason Balin Spector's not here.
One of you is cut and one of you just got signed to a contract extension. That's the trade-off. Keaton Mitchell hasn't been around the league long, right? But
Was he coming off ACL?
I believe he had an ACL injury. He played just 36 snaps at the very end of 2024. Chris, 1 target in the passing attack. It was a 28-yard touchdown catch.
That checks out.
The Bills cannot get sucked into committing so many resources to trying to stop these other, because Derrick Henry doesn't get used in the passing game. But you can't get sucked into committing so many resources to stopping these running backs that you do what every other team seems to, and you free up their wide receivers down the field. That can't be something that happens. And it was something you watched the Bills have an answer for, at least in the first half of that playoff game. It's the only reason that we were talking about being in the title game at all for the AFC. You can't get sucked into that. Flowers notwithstanding, that room is not filled with elite NFL talents who I think can win on their own. So with that said, your linebackers and your nickel corner have got to be able to stop those running backs in zone situations. I don't think we're going to see a lot of man coverage because it's been a death knell for teams who've tried to do it to the Bills. Think about the Dolphins. Year after year after year, they trot out they play game scripts that lean more towards man coverage. And every time they do, Josh Allen finds a way to hurt him with his legs. Lamar Jackson's the same guy, maybe more dynamic in the open field. So with that said, I don't expect to see much man at all, but when they're playing those zones, our linebackers have to be effective. They have to do that. And then it's also the defensive line rotation against the interior offensive line. Now, Ken thinks, and I think rightfully so, that a lot of the noise surrounding the interior offensive line of the Ravens is overblown. And I am inclined to agree with him on a lot of points because that's just the nature of social media in 2025. But being adequate at your job and being great at your job are 2 totally different things. And I really think that while the guards might be serviceable for the Ravens, they represent the weakest link along the offensive line. And so in that way, this team, this defensive line rotation the Bills have put together, I think is pretty well crafted to pose problems for a team constructed like the Ravens. This is where you're going to need your Deion Walker, your TJ Sanders, your Greg Rousseau, and your Joey Bosa to make a real difference. Because you think about Falele is one of the biggest offensive linemen in the entire NFL. He's over 360 pounds and 6'8". He's gotten by largely based on his size and his power. But in Walker, he's more evenly matched. Chris, what's the exact size and weight of Deion Walker? If you can give that a Google for me. One of the things that so it's rare that Daniel Falele ever comes up against anybody his own
6'7", 331.
It's rare that he ever comes up against a D tackle who's his own height and around, kind of infighting in his own weight class, we'll say. At least from a guy who has the penetration skill set and not, hey, I'm a one tech and I'm just here to eat space. And like, this is a unique challenge for Falele from a schematic standpoint and a skill set variance standpoint. And I'm really interested to see how that matchup plays out. I also think that with that size and height, it's hard for him to get on smaller defensive linemen who have a little more juice and a little more speed element to their game. Ed Oliver, TJ Sanders, these are two guys who seem to kind of lean towards that kind of physical makeup. I'm very interested to see how Falele holds up against the rotation of D tackles throughout the course of this game, not just early, but late, because when you're that big, you can get worn down over the course of a game. And then Andrew Voorhees. Andrew Voorhees is a guy who fell in the draft just because he was injured, and he got a redshirt year from the Ravens. Ken is spot on about that. He probably would have been drafted much higher than the 7th round if he hadn't gotten hurt when he did. With that said, though, his ceiling right now entering the season is still average NFL football player. He's still prone to some of the mistakes that you see from a younger, underexperienced kind of player. And he's working with a really good left tackle off his hip, so that does protect him to a certain degree in, pass rush situations. He's very powerful. He's a very strong guy, so he's really good in run blocking, but one of the places he struggled is when defensive ends rotate inside, something the Bills have shown that they're willing to do. And you now have to contend with the Javon Solomons and Greg Rousseaus and Joey Bosa's of the world. He's not a great pass protector. His hands are a little slow. He doesn't quite get the leverage he needs. He can get beat to the center's shoulder, especially when the center is preoccupied with the D tackle. So he's going to be susceptible to things. Stunts, loops, sometimes even just letting a guy like Greg Rousseau go head to head against him. I think there can be some victories had there. Even if it's not in terms of pressures, it's in terms of ruining the integrity of the pocket. And that's a victory for the Buffalo Bills. If you can do that without having to commit extra resources at the second level to it. I think the way that they attack those two guys is going to go a long way towards telling the story of how this game went. Point blank and period. If it goes well, it means we did the thing I talked about earlier. We disrupted them for about 15 minutes a clock. That's what it took for the Buffalo Bills to gain a slight edge. And hey, we held it, white knuckled it to the end, and we got a victory out of it. I mean, you think about how close the Ravens were to winning in game 1 of last year on primetime in Kansas City, and it was literally just a toe out of bounds.
Yeah.
That happened because Kansas City made them inefficient for 17 minutes of clock. And that was the end. The Bills have to find a way to do the same thing. I can't wait to see it. Chris, tell everybody where they can find us.
4180 Abbott Road, Dock Slot. And for those that, Rockpile Report talks too much about the tailgate, we're fucking leaning into it this year.
Hey, guys, on
this
screen
is
right
our
now, if you're watching on
tailgate
YouTube,
menu.
we have tailgate menus. We'll be disseminating these on social media, but if you want to see it first and make your mind up as to whether or not you want to trot over, go ahead, check it out. That's YouTube, Rockpile Report. I'm not going to ask anybody to subscribe because that's nonsense.
Well, yeah, because Mark's getting on your ass about that. Shotgun shells, chicken Sammys, crab cakes, old fashions, black Manhattans. It's the works.
Not just any old fashioned. What is it?
It's called Jimmy Carter Says Yes. It's a Southern old fashioned. It's toasted pecan syrup. peach bitters and benchmark bonded. So there's a guy that works at Four Roses that listens to our show. So, if he doesn't want to do business, maybe anybody at Buffalo Trace that can supply us with benchmark bonded for our old fashions, that would be lovely.
Don't listen to him. He's an idiot. We still love you. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how this one goes. And no, win or lose, the reactions are we're either going to the Super Bowl or the season's over. Everything sucks. The Ravens are obviously going to be AFC champions, and it's just.
This is why Lamar was 2 in the top 100.
It's only going to get worse from here, folks. So strap in, enjoy yourself. We got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. This has been your Rockpile Report.